And here we are, yet again, another Friday upon us, episode 34 of Maker That Money, the podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. Good morning, everyone. I am Pooch of Repkord, and with me, my trusty sidekick, Mr. Andrew Mayhall of 3D Gloop. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm energized after coming back from this great trade show. We went to a trade show last week. We recorded our first live recording of Maker That Money with Clayton. Uncle, you guys may know him as
Yeah.
Uncle Jesse on all the socials and stuff. And we had a really, really great conversation last week about how to make money with 3D printing, which was perfect for this particular festival about 3D printing. Rep Rap specifically.
hmm
And if you want, I just posted that. It should be up as we speak. And I finally got the backlog of the last 3 episodes. I'm terrible about this, guys. I'm so sorry. Posted as well. So we should be current as of now in terms of all the past episodes for anybody that wants to listen back on any of the major podcasting platforms or check us out on YouTube. As always, call to action, like, subscribe, smash buttons, all that stuff. Smash any button, really, but the like and subscribe helps us the most, or ringy the little bell if you want to get notified. As I often say, we record just about every Friday at 9 a.m. We have some exceptions for when we're traveling and whatnot,
hmm
but we enjoy having people in the chat, and as if just by divine providence, our chat has come alive, and we
Yep.
have
There we go.
some of our favorite people with us this morning. Liz, good morning. Hey, Liz, look, check this out. I got Liz brought me some fine Canadian candies and other things.
Nice.
I've got my coffee crisp along with my coffee in my Murph mug this morning, so I am also
Nice.
energized from that. Alex, good to see you. Grant, 3D Musketeers. Did you get scanned? Grant had one of the really nice high-tech, the Artec Eva 3D scanners,
hmm
and was scanning a bunch of people, and it is such a cool, I don't think I'd ever seen a 3D scanner of that caliber
I saw
before.
I saw him doing it, but no, I did not get scanned.
Oh, well, no, in a future thing, you'll have to check it out. I mean, it was
Yeah.
pretty impressive. He was picking up detail, like the emboss on the shirt. Like you could see the thickness of
hmm
the emboss. It was really cool.
Wow.
Joni, good to see you. She was at IRF as well. We've had her on before. Icon 3D Labs. Love seeing you. Never
hmm
let the machine wins. Never let the machines win. Mike, greetings. Llama, Maker Viking. Wow, we got a whole crowd, and I could
Yeah.
sit here and greet you all day, but we've got some interesting stuff to talk about today on the pod. Today we're going to talk about minimum viable business this time. So we've talked about minimum viable product before,
hmm
and we thought
Yes.
maybe we should go to the way back and try to think back and to past Pooch and past Andrew and think of all the things that we had to do just to get off the ground. So for those of you
Sure.
listening that are thinking it's time to dive in, or maybe you haven't quite fully committed, because some of this stuff you can kind of do after the fact. There's not
hmm
a there are some legal requirements, which we'll get into, and then there's some
Sure.
like nice to have stuff, and there's some specifics to your business and all that stuff, and we'll try to cover all of that. But before we do, we here like to try to harness the good energy, block out the bad, harness the good energy, block out the bad. We focus on the wins.
Oh
We're
yeah.
going to start off with some wins, and I would like you, Andrew, to tell me
Okay.
about a win you had this week.
Okay. Well, I think the most recent big win that we got, we actually were talking with UPS, and they granted us massively discounted rates for shipping. So now,
Hey,
pretty much, yeah, every product or every order now will ship via UPS. From our website, which is fantastic. USPS, United States Postal Service, for those that aren't in the US here, has really kind of been the king of the discounted shipping rates.
the
First class mail,
the
that sort of
value
stuff.
shipper.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Well, so UPS extended us kind of this amazing deal, which in many cases beats all of those value shipping options offered by USPS. So we're super excited to get to leverage that moving forward. I think it's going to bring a lot of value to our customers just in general, and also remove a lot of headaches.
That
you
is
know.
that is actually a really big deal, guys, because you know, to get UPS to take you seriously, like you have to have enough volume, you have to bend around. So it's kind of like a little like you know,
Hmm.
achievement unlocked thing, right? To get them to
Yeah.
actually negotiate. So that's fantastic. I'm actually behind on that front, and it's not for lack of trying either. I'm a little bit frustrated with my local. I've been trying to find out who my rep even is, you know, for a
Oh.
couple of times. So I'll keep working on that. But we've been using the shipping system that's native to the Shopify platform that we use,
Hmm.
and for the most part, that's actually been a really great thing. I like the workflow. You know, it's not without its flaws.
Sure.
But the downside of it is you're utilizing basically Shopify's account. So
Hmm.
you're enriching them by using
Hmm.
your volume to basically inflate what Shopify does. So Shopify gets hooked up with the discount, and you know, in turn they say they pass that along, but I got to imagine you know, they're going to
Hmm.
keep a portion of that for
They're
yourself.
making a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
And while I think that's great when you're getting started, because compared to a retail rate, it's
Hmm.
still, you know, if you pay retail, you go down to the UPS
Oh, it's
store,
ridiculous.
it's
Yeah.
nuts, right? The cost of
Hmm.
shipping, guys, and this is it can't be overstated if you're running a product based business online, like
Hmm.
how much. To us, our shipping expense is the second largest expense to labor
Yep.
there is. Um, and obviously that makes a huge difference in your margin and your profitability to optimize. So, you know, thinking about like even when you're just getting started and thinking about what kind of products you might want to sell and stuff, big bulky stuff
Hmm.
is always super expensive to ship. The psychological effect of people wanting to pay for shipping versus offering free shipping, and offering free
Yep.
shipping if you have a big bulky thing that's expensive to ship is harder to say hide within the price of the item. Potentially
Hmm.
depends on what it is, but anyway, congrats to you on achieving enough volume for UPS to take notice. And if something to be aware of, guys, as I understand it, those things are always negotiable too. You know, they have a
Hmm.
lot of they leave a lot of room to negotiate with their high volume. So it's one of those.
Yeah.
We talked about this in the divide. You know, the rich get richer kind of phenomenon, that like success rewards success. You are given more
Hmm.
discount the more successful you are, the more you ship, right?
Yep. That's
So,
exactly it.
and it's like, but I could use those discounts when I'm getting started, not necessarily
Yep.
like once I've already got all the, you know, the business.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yep.
anyway,
No,
that's
it
good.
gets interesting to say the least. So, but yeah, we're super excited. It's been it's been a long time coming. I'll say that. So, again, it's like
Yeah.
you just keep working at it, and eventually you'll get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other advantage of that is you can kind of start to pit the shippers against each other, where you're like, well, I'm getting, you know, like FedEx is going to call up, be
Mm.
like, hey, what's going on? You don't use us anymore. Well, yeah, because UPS gives me this rate. And they go like, oh, well, let's see what we can do. You know, it's all, I
That's
know.
exactly how it works.
It's totally how it works. And
Yep.
no shame in it, guys. You know, yeah, that's what is it? A penny saved is a penny earned. Like, you
Yeah.
know, like there's
Yeah.
more than one. You don't have to sell more stuff necessarily. You know, optimizing what you're doing and focusing fire is a very, very
Hmm.
good strategy for, you know, getting in a better place. And oftentimes once you've already done that and you've got systems for packaging and shipping and that, then it becomes easier to go wide. So I always like to
Hmm.
say go deep and then go wide, and we haven't really
Yep.
gone into that. That could be a good future topic as well. Good win. I don't have anything that is like quite as good as that. I'm just gonna say
Oh, come on.
I'm happy that all my stuff made it back from Earth undamaged, which I was a little surprised about because some of the boxes that I had taken as carry on, or not carry on, as checked luggage, came back in really really bad shape, and I'm like,
Ooh.
something is destroyed in here. And the worst that happened was my coffee crisp all had kind of melted together. But I've kind of been pulling it apart, and it's what they say, it's all the same to your stomach anyway. So thank you again, Liz, for my coffee crisp. I love it. Plus all the other. Did you know there's all kinds of other interesting Canadian candy we don't have? They call
Oh
Their
yes,
Smarties or chocolate, and they're their Kit Kat tastes different. It's all
it's
it's just
yeah.
all crazy up there. It's all crazy.
Well, yeah, it's weird, and they're just like just up north of us. Like, why do they have all of the special candy? Like,
Well, because they're special. They're special. They're a land of special people. All right. Let's talk about the origin of today's topic for a moment. It was inspired, as many things are with me, from a tweet. And it's been a past rant of mine as well. And Llama is going to get picked on. He's in the chat, so he's going to get picked on a
oh
little bit
boy,
here. But he knows I love him, and he knows that. And just a shout out to Tom Llama and his brothers who are starting up a shop. He is a very talented woodworker. He has sent us some fantastic CNC routed clocks and signage and stuff like that, and a nice combination of that and resin and stuff. So we wish him all the best as he launches his endeavor. But the tweet I'm referring to is my comment earlier in the week where I said, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you email me soliciting my business for something from a generic email domain at Gmail or whatever, and you're asking for something, you're going right in the bin. Like, to me, you don't represent yourself, and let me clarify too, because I think part of the reason people got a little bit snippy on it was because it wasn't the application of this usage or what was happening. I don't think was completely clear. There
all
are
right,
you'll notice that as you get your business out there and you have a presence and stuff like that, you're going to start to get cold calls, emails, solicitations all
there's
the
so
time.
many of them.
All the time for everything, right? And a lot of them are individuals that are representing to be, working for an agency, or they're basically trying to say like, hey, I want to provide this service. Like, let's just say SEO optimization. You get that all the time, right, Andrew? I don't know if you get enough
Exactly.
for that all the time. I do. And it's so surprising to me that there are people that are like, hey, will you check out our service? Like, when can we get together this weekend on a call and we can go over what we can do? And it's like from Mike7442@gmail.com. And I'm like,
Yep.
but then the
Yep.
signature says such and such agency or whatever. And to me, I look at that as the equivalent of like showing up to the office as a sales call in jeans and a t-shirt. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you could do business, and maybe some people don't have a problem with it, but if you want to get taken seriously, you need to convey a degree of professionalism. And
Sure.
to me, I feel that, and this could be because I am biased. I have a background in web development. I know that it's not a terribly difficult thing to do to set up an email cut with your own business domain, right? You're one of the first
Sure.
things anybody that's doing business this day, it probably is the first thing that a lot of people do is register a domain, right? Because
Yep.
you need it for your website, you need it for you don't need it. Like,
Mhm.
there are businesses that just do sales on social media,
Sure.
right? But again, it's what are you trying to project? Who are you trying to be? What is the state of this business? And if you're fine, if you just want to be a little side hustle, make a little money on the side, all of that stuff, that's fine. But if you're trying to represent yourself as a company,
Sure.
I think you got to go a little further. That's
Yep.
again, this is my opinion. You feel free to disagree. I completely understand that when you have limited resources, you have to make decisions on this stuff. And so when I was saying I was going to pick on Llama, his point is well taken. He is not reaching out to people at the moment and saying, hey, would you like to use our services? He has a product-based business. It is not mission critical to the operation of his business. So that tweet wasn't necessarily for him and his style of business.
Sure.
That said, I would still look at it as maybe a year one or a starting thing. I don't think it's ever a bad thing to, you've already reserved the domain and all this stuff. And the
Mhm.
while he's absolutely right that there are a lot of companies out there, like I think he said he was using Squarespace or something like that, that will try to add on the cost of like, oh, and we'll handle your email for you and stuff too. Um,
Mhm.
that's a lot of times like an upsell where they'll mark a lot of that stuff up. Like you can
Sure.
get your own domain very inexpensively using different systems and stuff. Now, whether you want to spend the time and energy to do that, obviously is up to you. But
Mhm.
I'm talking, and like I said, I think there you're free to disagree. What is your opinion of this particular topic? And then we'll go into some of the nitty gritty about some of the other things that we think we
Sure.
need.
Well, so for product-based business, if you're going to be selling anything, you're going to need a domain name. I mean, right off the bat, like this day and age, everyone's using e-commerce pretty much. Sure, you might be selling on, let's say an Etsy store, or maybe it's eBay or whatever. Yeah, you could probably get away with not requiring a domain name, and maybe getting away with like a Gmail or Yahoo or something like that. But I mean, I'm right there with you. When it comes to, if you're doing customer outreach, if you're trying to drum up business for your business, it really, it sets it apart, saying, okay, hey, I'm just doing this, or maybe I'm just getting started, versus okay, I'm taking this serious.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Even
I completely agree.
But here's the thing, even if you're not reaching out, at some point you're going to need to put a maybe you don't have a customer service email to start, but you're not going to get very far without having a requirement of having an email address for your business, right?
Hmm.
And why not
Yep.
just start on the right foot? Now, again, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, like it can be as cheap as like what's a domain registration running these days?
Like 10,
10
12
bucks
dollars. I mean, we
a year, and then
yeah.
what not, maybe that's not including the mail service and stuff like that. So it's just
Hmm.
taking the time to set that up, because people are going to want to reach out to you sometimes. So if
Hmm.
you want to give it like support at Llama Makes or whatever, I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot again,
Yeah.
Tom, but at support at repcord.com, like you're going to get taken a lot more seriously if it's not support Repcord support at hotmail.com or whatever.
Yeah.
That just seems a little, I don't know. Is it tacky, guys? Tell me in the chat. Tell me what you think. I'm really not trying to be judgy of
Yeah.
people.
Sure.
I think this is something that sometimes people need to hear. And I've had conversations with other people in the past, and they've been appreciative because they just didn't think about it.
Mhm.
You've got a million things flying at you when you're starting a business, and a lot of people don't
Yeah.
have the same expertise in how to do a lot of these things. I understand that.
I think again, it really comes down to looking at what you're doing, though. Maybe if you're doing this business as a hobby, where it's one of those things where it's a lifestyle business, where you're not really trying to grow this, or whatever. Say for instance, you're a woodworker and you make cutting boards, and maybe you sell one a month or something like that. I don't think you would need to go and get a domain name or an email, for something like that. But if you were a service-based business where you're selling insurance or something of that nature, then yeah, like I bring that up because we had someone who was trying to start, a local like insurance agency reach out to us from a Gmail, and it's like, dude, I don't trust you.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you don't have a website that I can go to. Like, yeah, I understand you resell like the big name, like insurances, but also at the same time, it's like, how do I know you're legit?
Well,
You
and
could
even
just be
if they
some
are
guy.
legit, it's like,
Hmm.
like I said, if somebody shows up there and they're just like in a stained t-shirt and all that stuff, like you're not going to feel great about doing business with it. And maybe that's just me. I don't know. But like,
Yeah.
I think I'm not alone in the sense that,
Yeah.
people are evaluating who they're dealing with. Right. And so it's just it's a professionalism thing.
Yeah.
We could probably debate this, to the ends of the earth. I think there's other things though that are like that as well. And a lot of times when you're first getting started, you don't know what you don't even know. So it's like I think you're allowed some leeway for a period of time if you're getting started, or at least people that are kind are willing to do that.
Sure.
Some are just much more. I mean, and the truth is, you may never get a response. So if you feel like you're reaching out or you whatever, and you're not getting the response, like you need to stop and look at what your process is, what's going on, why maybe are people, doing that?
Hmm.
It's hard enough as it is, even with a legitimate domain name and stuff, like doing outreach, cold calling. I don't know that that's a great strategy in general. I guess it depends on your business and all this stuff, but
Hmm.
obviously, it must work for some people, or I would cease to do it. I don't know about that
Hmm.
argument, because telemarketing used to be huge, and like with the advent of blockers and everybody just not answering their phone anymore and stuff like that, like over time it'll
Yep.
probably die out as people are more um, strict about cultivating their unsubscribes and all that stuff. Like maybe these
Sure.
email cold calls won't happen, but it's a pretty low hanging fruit in terms of a shotgun approach, right? Like you can tell
Hmm.
when it's coming from an email list and just blasting out to everybody in the hopes that it's a numbers game, you can get somebody to respond. But there's a big difference between that and the personal email that is just from one individual, right?
Sure.
Anyway, let's talk about some other uh go back to the beginning of Gloop. Go to the beginning of any of your ventures, and
Okay.
think about like what were the first things you had to do. Like let's talk actionable items for people that want to get started. What do you need as a minimum viable business?
Sure. Well, so I think you really need to ask yourself again, what is it that you're going to be doing? Both of my businesses, the one before Gloop and Gloop, I knew were going to be product businesses that were going to sell, like things to people. And with that, there was going to be potential liabilities. And so thinking through these things, I needed to separate the liability from the business versus the liability to myself, and
Right.
with that comes setting up some form of legal entity.
Correct.
In many states here in the United States, you don't have to do any of that. There are a few states where you have to register, like, oh, I'm going to be a sole proprietor or something of that nature. But a lot of them, you can literally stand up a business and just start selling stuff. And I think it's important to really ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to do? If it's something where you're selling, like car parts or whatever, like on eBay that you have, or whatever it might be, you go thrifting and you find something that's more valuable than what you paid for it and you resell it. You could ask yourself, it's like, okay, is this going to be a
Arbitrage. Yeah.
long-term viable business, or is it going to be something that I'm just kind of doing on the side?
Right. Right. Right.
you know I think the first thing though is really is that. And then the second thing would be, okay, set up the legal entity. Determine whether it's an LLC, an incorporated company,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what you're going to do. And that's a daunting process sometimes.
Sure.
There's certainly like websites out there that help you. You go to like LegalZoom or whatever and you can
Sure.
file like an LLC really quickly. But a lot of times, if you just do a little bit of research, I think you can really figure out how do you set up a business pretty quickly.
Right.
Um,
And Google is your friend here, guys. And honestly, like my first thing I would say to anybody that's looking to get started is be prepared to read and research and be a student of this whole thing, because you're gonna learn. There's a lot of the stuff that's out there. It just isn't. There are resources out
mhm,
there, but what's good for the goose ain't good for the gander, depending on what kind of business you're in. And so like you say, like and there's costs associated with everything. So
mhm,
the minimum setup, like in your state, may even have different legal requirements. Like
mhm,
you could actually, a lot of people do just start, like, go onto eBay and just start
mhm.
selling stuff there as
Yep,
Andrew Mayhall, and
yep,
as could I. That's not to say that at some point, if it grows to some level of success, that you're not going to potentially get in trouble for not having some kind of entity. But at the very least, you're known as what's called a sole proprietor. If it's just you doing
mhm,
stuff under your own name, and come tax time in the U.S., I don't know how it is in other countries, you would
yep,
basically report that as income on your personal tax form using your social security number.
yep, yep.
That is like probably the minimum
Yeah.
business.
That's really it.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
As you are doing
Mhm.
business as yourself. Now, the next step up might be what I was just saying, DBA, where you can actually
Mhm.
get a fictitious business name,
Mhm.
and it can be anything that you want. You may have heard this before,
Mhm.
guys, and apologies if this is overly patronizing to some, but we're starting at the beginning here. Doing business as is a fictitious business name, and I know in the state of California that just requires you pick a name, you register, I believe, with the local county. It's been a while since I've done a
Mhm.
DBA. And they require that you post it in the newspaper saying we're going to do business as this, and it gives people a period of time. Like anybody reads the newspaper anymore,
Yep.
but whatever, it keeps the newspapers in business still. Um, and supposedly that allows anybody to basically see it out there and then complain if it's too similar to what their thing is.
Mhm.
And once that's approved, you can take that over to the bank. So and
Yep.
because what you will need is some kind of bank account and some ability to move money, right? So
Yep.
ideally you're not doing this with your within your personal finance. Like that's when you start to get
Yes.
to a pro level, you really want to start separating the business expenses out from the personal expenses for the reasons that you mentioned earlier, the legal liability of
Mhm.
it. If you get
Yep.
sued as a
Mhm.
business owner and it is you are one and the same with that means everything that you own prior to the
Mhm. Is up for
business
grabs.
is up for
Yep.
grabs. Like if you get sued, they can take your house if you have a house or your car or whatever, like
Mhm.
garnish your wages. If
Yep.
you set up a legal entity that creates a layer of insulation, so that the worst thing that happens theoretically is that the company itself goes bankrupt, or
Yep.
only the company's assets are subject to
Yep.
collections should it ever the worst happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Highly recommend that separation, guys. Like even if you
yes.
don't think you're necessarily going to be that big, it's not that much more difficult to lay
Mhm.
like those things on. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, yeah, I think it's we're kind of glossing over a lot of a lot of things here, but one of the one of the things I'd like to touch on is really again following the concepts of minimum viable product to build out your minimum viable business in that if you're just getting started, we're assuming you have some sort of idea, some sort of service that you're going to be offering, some sort of product you're going to be selling. But there's nothing wrong in doing some early tests where you don't go and set up that business, you don't have that domain name, you don't have where you're just trying to see if you can come up with this product or solution or service and test to see how it works. um I think that there are many avenues available. So, registering as a sole proprietor, even though you don't have the separation of liability, if it's something where, again, you're a woodworker and you're building cabinets, for like, a local town or like in your local area, maybe that's a good option just to see, like, oh, hey, maybe I can create a business out of this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think there's a lot of things where people get overwhelmed really quickly.
Yeah, it was
So
certainly
maybe
it is.
taking a step back.
It's overwhelming.
Mhm,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Step
and
back,
just doing
plan.
what that minimum viable, requirements are. Like, set up your bank account, maybe it's just registered in your name, maybe it's a DBA. I think that that's acceptable. At some point, I think you also have to go in with the mindset that I need to change this relatively quickly if it starts getting traction.
Yes.
Um,
So
you know.
let's step back even further. Let's at least disclaim that
Mhm,
there are and now there are a couple legal things to be aware of. This is
mhm,
going to depend on your locality, guys, but like
mhm.
sometimes if you live within city limits, even if you're working out of your garage, you may be legally required to have a business permit where you
Yep.
are. And
Mhm.
which isn't to say that people don't do this and don't get the business permit and are fine and whatnot. But eventually, if you get caught, not having a permit, you can be fined and all that stuff. So there are things, and if it's
Mm-hmm.
not if you're in an unincorporated county, there may be requirements for your county. The county I live in doesn't require a business license for a home-based business. Some do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Usually it's a pretty nominal fee. When we moved to the shop, the county that the shop, they're different counties, as in does require a business permit, and it was to the tune of $120 for the registration, and then a $20 annual renewal
Yep.
fee. So it's an income earner for the county in this case. It really just gives you a little piece of paper that you're required to post in a
Yep.
conspicuous area that just says you're allowed to operate a business here. That may be a baseline requirement. Joni in the chat mentions like, you absolutely should have a separate bank account regardless of your entity. I completely agree. Like,
Yes.
but as with much of this stuff, there is no requirement. You could do all this stuff. And like Andrew's saying, like sometimes the better play is to get started and just see if there's something there, because most of these things you can change later with pretty minimal effort. You can decide to be a sole proprietor and then switch to a LLC or an S corp or a C corp, and there's kind of some distinctions to how those things work and what that ends up meaning. But never hurts to do your research and all that stuff, and at least have a plan in the back of your mind. But like you're saying, prove out the business model first, prove to yourself that there is this thing has legs and stuff like that, and then let's layer on like don't worry about the things that you don't need right away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so binning those things is a challenge sometimes. Like, is this a right now thing, or is this a like a 1 to 2 month thing, or is this a like next year thing?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting because again, I think it really all comes back down to what is it that you were trying to do. If you start answering that question, and I think that gives you kind of the roadmap of what steps you should take to actually make that minimum viable business.
Yeah.
Again, like you're a woodworker, you're selling things, maybe at a craft show or something.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have to have that professional domain name. Maybe you don't have to have an email. You're just handing out business cards at your farmer's market or whatever. It has your personal cell phone number. It has, again, a Gmail domain name.
Right.
Like that's probably sufficient. It comes down to exactly what you're doing. I think is ultimately what we're saying.
Yeah, and play a little chess here. Like think about like, yeah, you can start by using your cell phone number, and maybe then you get some cards printed and all that stuff, and then you realize like, oh, you know what? I don't want my cell phone number. Now I got to go print some new business cards. So same thing with I don't want my personal address on there. So, give some thought to what information you're sharing publicly and how easy that is to change if you need to down the road.
Yeah.
So I would say that what we're talking about, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is what we would consider maybe best practice, but not necessarily required. And if we do identify things that are required, and maybe then there's the category is like strongly recommend doing this. I feel like that email, that domain, like that falls into the I very strongly recommend that as a minimum thing, but it is not technically the minimum. You do not have to have a domain to do business. You do not have to have a separate bank account. You don't have to have QuickBooks. Should you? Not QuickBooks, but some kind of bookkeeping software.
Should you? Probably, but
yeah. So talk about more of those things. So let's talk about more best practice stuff in terms of like, okay, minimum viable is literally maybe it's a business permit, and beyond that, it's like an idea and the time and the execution and literally a bank account to put stuff in, and then probably an ability to obviously spend money. So you need a credit card or a debit card or something if you're not going to want to write cash, checks and stuff. Technically, you could pay cash for everything, I suppose. It's just What if you guys think of something in the chat? If there's something, what am I missing that you minimum have to have? Let me know. But now let's go on to best practice stuff. What's we really recommend doing this?
Yeah, well, again, let's assume here that you have an idea, you have a business that you're starting, and that you have at least some traction. So that means that you're going to have some money coming in. So yes, best practice being that you have that separate bank account, so that the money that you're making goes in there. The next thing that personally I would look at, in terms of just operational nature of the business, would be some way of tracking that. Yes, you can use Excel. We at Gloop used Excel for almost the first whole year that we were in business, instead of using like a QuickBooks or something else.
Even
But
cheaper
I'll
than
tell you that,
Excel would be Google Sheets. So
yeah.
there's a lot of these things are free, guys. I mean, free
Hmm.
being relative, right? If you don't count Google taking all
Hmm.
your info as a cost. But
Yeah.
but a spreadsheet, sure.
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet for tracking your expenditures, categorizing your expenses, kind of figuring out, what's going on. Again, we're assuming you have an operational business where you're going to be able to make money and spend that money that you're bringing in. The next thing, probably, is that you should, depending on the type of business, potentially start looking for how do you scale this to, you know, maybe move out of your house or move into a professional space. Like,
Mhm.
it's kind of funny because here, 4.5 years in, I still operate Gloop out of my personal house, and
Sure.
it's something that we have made work, but it's not ideal. And so I think, again, looking at what type of business you have, looking at kind of planning for your own success. We've talked about that a little bit in the past.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself, and how can you make the leaps or the jumps from one phase to the next?
Right.
Um, again, it really depends on the business that you're in and what you're doing, but these are all very just generic. you know
Right. And there are those things that again like help you um be taken more seriously as a business. Like I know it
Hmm.
is frustrating for a lot of there are a lot of people that run their entire business out of their house, and it's totally fine.
Hmm.
Because they're not public facing. Usually they're sort of like I was a web developer for, over 15 years, and I was operating in my home office. I didn't need a place for people to come visit and all that stuff. And that's fine. You can be very
Hmm.
successful with that. So it depends on what you're
Yep.
trying to do. But if you are getting to a point where you um like I said, want to get to the next level, like obviously being
Hmm.
able to hire if you need help. You
Exactly.
can't
Hmm.
really, I mean, you can, but
You can, but it's not
not a
ideal.
good idea to
Exactly.
have employees coming to your house. And so
Hmm.
there's the things that are needed, and then at the same by the same token, when you're trying to pitch other companies, like having a dedicated facility and address where people can visit and all that stuff just puts you at another
Hmm.
level psychologically, and is going to make bigger companies more comfortable with the idea of working with
Hmm.
you because let's be honest, when you're making that evaluation, you're sometimes thinking like, what are the odds that this guy is going to be around in a year? And
Exactly.
and there's a lot more likeliness of somebody that's in their house to be able to just fold up shop and not be around versus, so
Hmm.
again, it's I think a lot of people think, oh, that's just vanity or whatever. It's not though. It's
Hmm. Oh
presenting.
no, there's a real value add there of having a professional space. And listen, guys, if you feel that you need to get there but you can't afford that, there are plenty of like co-working spaces that you can sign up for, where
Sure.
it's where you, and we did this, where you can have a meeting room where if you need to take a meeting with a potential client, or
Right.
talk and start, like having some negotiations, or just a nice place to work in, you can leverage those services, without taking on the whole, like the requirements and the liability, and just the burden of an office space.
Sure.
But like for us, like we are well past the area where we need to hire people. And again, it's not something where we've been able to just bring on people and say, oh hey, yeah, come to my house and work in my house. It doesn't work that way. So like
Yeah.
that's one of those things where we held on for too long, because again, bootstrapping, keeping the costs low, that's where we were, what we were prioritizing. But now, as we start to transition, that value add is going to be, again, planning for our own success here, allowing us to bring on new products, allowing us to potentially, expand our operations,
Hmm.
and just grow in general. So, there, it's not a vanity play.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit in some cases, but in many cases, there's a utility there, right?
Well, certainly, and with all things, especially as coming from the maker world, we try to hack things together and do things
Hmm.
affordably and all that stuff. And there are very creative ways, like you said, around this that don't require a large uh capital expense or influx of cash and stuff like that, so you can operate, but at some point you're going to start to get in your own way, and you need to be aware of that and identify that and pivot. Like I've said, for like we have stuff stacked to the rafters. I would love to be in a bigger space, but when we talked
Hmm.
about the divide and stuff, like going from the rent I'm at now to the next biggest space is not just
Sure.
you know I can't just double my square footage and double it's literally like 5 to 10x or more, because now I have to redo the tenant improvements of a new place, and we have
Hmm.
downtime as we move everything. And so the bigger you become, the more difficult it is to maneuver when the flywheel is already turning. So
Hmm.
so that's why we try to say, spend as much time planning ahead, giving yourself a little extra runway when you can. But there are going to be limitations, and sometimes you have to be patient. A lot of my
Yep.
frustrations circle around from me just wanting to continually try to punch above my weight and not being realistic about where we are and what resources we have, because at the end of the day, it's pie for us, right? Like, I don't have an
Hmm.
infinite amount of money. There's only the pie is only so big, and if I'm using this much money for paying for
Hmm.
services and rent and all the other stuff, I don't have it available to grow other things, and it's not always clear which lever is going to grow the pie quickest and stuff like that. And it's a
Yep.
it's a frustrating challenge a lot of the time. But that's a bit of a
Ye-
digression from the rat. So it's like you can spend a
yeah.
lot of time right now planning, doing all these things, setting up things the way that you want them to be, and you can bankrupt yourself before you even prove out that you're going to sell and make this stuff. That's kind of the VC fallacy that I think, it's not a fallacy, but it's like the
Mhm.
pitfall that a lot of them encounter, right?
Yep.
We're going to get all this we have a great idea, and we're going to raise a bunch of money on this idea, and
Mhm.
everything is um uh basically built around the concept that this is going to succeed, and then when it doesn't, it all
Yep.
comes toppling down because you spent the money before you proved that you had the thing, right?
Mhm.
So that's why we're
Yeah.
big fans of bootstrapping, because it's a more sustainable way of growth. Now, that's not to say you can't be successful with VC, but look at the numbers, look at the
Yep.
percentages. What are the percentages of VC funded things that are successful? I don't know what
Yeah.
the latest is. I
I
probably
don't know off
depended
the top
on
of my head, but it's,
industry, but
yeah.
it's low, right? Like, aren't
Yeah.
VCs saying if they get like 1 in 30 exits or 1 in 20 exits, they're
Yeah.
happy?
It's successful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the expectation, even by the investor, is that maybe
Yeah.
1 in 20. I don't know. You tell me if you
Yeah.
guys have some more up to date stats in the chat. But
you know,
yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, so getting back to some of the other things that I would consider possibly best practices, or maybe in cases a requirement. Um, and it's crazy. It's so crazy that I'm going to say this now, because there was a younger me would scream and yell and say, "No, that's not a requirement." But I'd say a business plan. It sounds a little silly, maybe archaic, but in many cases, going through the process of writing things down, saying, "Hey, this is what I'm doing with my business. This is where I'm going to go. This is how I'm going to make money. This is my competition."
Hmm.
It is invaluable because it allows you to, like, articulate these directions, or see your business from a different level or a different perspective than
Sure.
you actually are in the thick of it, operating it. It's one of those things where we actually built a business plan about 2.5, 3 years into the operation of our business. Beforehand, we never built any business plan.
Right.
And when we went through that process, we realized there were so many different like avenues that we could actually, different verticals, different, areas that we could scale, and also where we realized where we're falling short on, and things that we needed to focus in. And it was
Yeah.
like, wow, this is actually really valuable. And beforehand, I would tell you that, oh, just get to work, just get into it. And while that is, I think, really valuable, I think there does, there is a little bit of truth to taking a step back and seeing about creating some sort of plan where you can at least build to that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I would throw a couple more guideposts on that because I think the business
Sure.
plan, and Joni's commenting in the chat, shots fired, business plan, because it's like this ominous thing that I think as a business owner, a lot of people are like, I don't want to do a business plan, like, because traditional business plans, if you looked at them, guys, can be like 40 pages and blah blah blah. Like, it doesn't need to be that. Like, I would
Mhm.
say we should qualify like a one sheet business plan, like
Sure.
something that is
An
just
executive
achievable,
summary.
an executive summary. But you can call it a business plan, call it what you want, but like just that you sat down and you
Mhm.
tried to outline just the main thing. And honestly, I think there should be the day one, like, because let's be like, even if you were just define it with like spend 1 hour
Mhm.
doing no more than one page of
Mhm.
just writing out, what are you doing? How are you going to make money? Who's your competition? Maybe strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, that kind of thing. I love SWOT analyses.
Mhm.
Um, just, it doesn't have to have pretty graphs. It doesn't have to be something that you're necessarily putting in a pitch deck. Okay.
Sure.
But that just starting, just defining something and
Mhm.
taking going through the thought exercise, you're gonna be so much further ahead than so many people already.
Mhm.
And then and then start doing what you're talking about, right? Like, so let's just say
Yep.
1 hour, one page start, and let's see, and then can you start? Are you earning some money? Are you like, okay,
Mhm.
maybe 1 month in, do it
Mhm.
again, one
Do it
hour.
again. Exactly.
1 hour, maybe it's a revision or maybe it's a write afresh, but it's like 1 hour, no more than one page.
Mhm. Yeah.
What do you think of
Yeah,
this
I love that
process?
idea.
And then is it 1 month and 1 year? I don't know, or 1 quarter or 1 year. I don't think you have
Mhm.
to do it that often necessarily. It depends on what you're doing and how
Sure.
severe. But I think you're gonna be surprised how much changes because there's all the stuff that you think you know off
Mhm.
the top, and then the reality sets in. And
Mhm.
I would say until you see it through the seasons and get
Mhm.
a year under your belt and understand the cyclical nature of demand in your industry,
Mhm.
you're not gonna have. I mean, even 1 year is not really a lot of data in the big scheme of
It's
things.
not.
You can't
Mhm.
really start drawing trend until you've done that, because the truth is, if you're doing it right, you're kind of moving along a growth path. Hopefully, that
Yep.
it'll look maybe flat or linear to start, but the thing is that really most businesses are going to start to hockey stick at some point, and it's really hard to tell when you're on the plot
Yep.
where on the plot you are. And so when you're trying to forecast, like, forecasting is still a challenge for us, 6
Mhm.
years in, um
Yep.
because products move differently, demand changes and all that stuff. So that's why I say I
Yeah.
wouldn't invest a ton of time trying to
Oh, yeah,
play
sure.
too many moves down
Mhm.
the board, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was really, mainly, like for us again when we looked at the business plan, it was kind of looking back and then also trying to look forward, and it was eye opening. And I think it really, for a moment there, it really helped us plan and strategize of where the next move was.
Right.
Because Gloop, we've been around for about 4.5 years now, and things have been growing at a pretty linear rate, but until this year where things started to hockey stick.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, well, hey, now, like, it also just happened to coincide with us actually doing a business plan, or maybe it was like, well, we started figuring it out. We're like, maybe we should double down on this, maybe we should stop doing this. And
Right.
we made some changes after that business plan, and I think it all goes into it,
Sure.
but Absolutely. I think it's one of those things that you should at least put some thought into.
No, I agree.
So,
I agree. And I think trying to make it digestible and less ominous to people is probably well worthwhile
mhm.
too. So like I said, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Joni mentioned she handed me a thing at Earth that was and I don't think I showed it to you yet. Um and in fact, I would love to. I'd mentioned this to her. We should get like a little Google Docs folder
Okay.
together of resources, but it was something that she uses in her CPA job of when people are approaching to start a business. Basically, a list of it was maybe 20 questions, maybe less, and she's saying like that qualifies as a business plan if you answer all the questions. Sure, yeah, maybe sometimes and
Yeah.
there's probably a ton of resources like that online. And if you guys have some
Mhm.
favorites or whatever that you've used in the past, let us know, and I'm happy to compile and we'll put them up somewhere and we'll add a link. So I think sharing resources is kind of part of the whole reason we started doing this. And moving
Mhm.
from verbal to some actual tangible stuff is never a bad thing. Joni was
Sure.
gracious enough to share what she has and said we can share it with everybody else. And in a future one, what I'll do, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'll pull it out and we can actually go through some of those questions. But it was a really
That'd
good
be awesome.
questionnaire, and it was just like I said, just something to get you thinking, get the wheels turning
Mhm.
about the stuff that you may not have given consideration to.
Sure.
A business plan is a
Yeah.
fantastic one. Minimum viable business, a plan,
Yep.
right? Whether
Yep.
it's spelled out explicitly or whatever, but you got to have a plan. Got to have a plan.
Yep.
What
Yep.
other things? What about a phone number in this day and age, Andrew? What do you
Mm.
think about that?
Yeah,
Is that
so
required?
that's an interesting one. So in many cases, you could probably get away with doing, all of your communications electronically, maybe getting on Google Meets or, whatever it might be. Microsoft Teams, whatever flavor you like, Zoom. But when it comes down to, picking up the phone and calling someone, you could probably get away with using your cell phone number unless you're in a very particular type of business. This was something that we learned, and we learned very quickly, very early on, that we actually, because we ship dangerous goods, have to have a registered business phone number that has 24 by 7 monitoring to it, like that we pick up and
Hmm.
we answer. And that was one of those really weird things. It was like, well, wait, that's not a normal requirement for normal businesses.
But it's
But
something the
it,
Department of Transportation requires. Is that right
yeah,
for
so it's
hazmat?
yeah, so exactly. So when we ship a hazmat, when we ship a product that's classified as a dangerous good, and
Hmm.
we have to fill out we call it the candy stripe papers, and we ship that. We have to supply a phone number that has 24 by 7 access to it,
Okay.
and so that's like a service that we pay for. Because I don't want to stay up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So you actually have a call service then that
Hmm.
answers that. Interesting. And what
Yeah,
they're going to
so
come to
so
your
we
house in the middle of the night if they
Y-
have to?
yeah, so how it works is that you have to have a phone number so that if for instance there's a transportation emergency, they can call that phone number and figure out information related to that shipment. So how it works for us is we pay a call service, and we end up filing the shipment. We tell the call service, we just send the shipment invoice to them, and then we send along the material safety data sheet, and like some other generic information, so that way if
Interesting.
anyone calls about it, they can ask about the shipment, and boom, there it is. They have all of the information available to them, and it's just in like a little folder that we upload. But yeah,
Now,
it's
now
that's a requirement for our business.
that's something I didn't. You mentioned something I didn't realize before, but are you required to send the MSDS with every shipment for your what is being
so
shipped in hazmat when it's hazmat?
So when it's over a what it depends on where it's going, and it depends on the quantity. So
Mm,
many cases, like our shipments, here in the US, or even a lot of international, they fall under accepted quantities. So
I
that means
see.
that the rules are a little different. We don't have to have those numbers. We don't have to have the candy stripe documents. We don't have to have a lot of stuff because it's under accepted quantities. But once
Right.
it goes above accepted quantities, that's where those regulations kick in. So yeah, we have to print out SDSs. We have to, have them, basically electronically filed. A bunch of like really annoying
Interesting.
regulatory stuff.
But you're right. You have to obviously know your business and know what's required. So that's interesting. So phone number. Grant
Hmm.
mentions in the chat Google Voice. We use Google Voice. I don't want to
Yeah.
give out my personal cell number, but I have no problem giving out a Google Voice number that can in turn forward to me or be
Hmm.
monitored on the website. So that's a fantastic tool. Free for personal use, paid if you have it part of your business subscription if you're doing that. But there's
Yeah.
that's a great tool. And what's funny is you're always going to usually it's the older customer crowd, but that's
Hmm.
big beef that a lot of that older crowd has. Like, there's no number for me to call. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't want to talk to you, man. Like that's no. I mean,
Well.
it sounds funny, but it's just like and that's just a difference in time and opinion. It's like I don't believe that there's not
Hmm.
service that I can't provide just as good via email
Hmm.
or chat, but
Yeah.
that feels very impersonal to a lot of people who just want to get it done. But I'm a small business. I can't afford to have my day disrupted by phone calls. And so I need
Hmm.
an ability to not just cue it, but then have a written record of what's being said in the same way.
Yeah.
And so there's a
Yeah.
reason that a lot of companies obviously do that. And I'm sorry that it's not your preferred communication method, but that doesn't work for me. And I think that's fair. Now, you
Yeah.
guys may tell me you feel otherwise in the chat. Again, a lot of opinions here, but
Yeah.
you will inevitably, if you do this long enough, you'll get somebody bitching about the fact that you should have a phone number that they can
Yeah.
call. Um,
Yeah, and we actually have several different phone numbers. Like for instance, so we're not retail yet, but Gloop products are going to be retail soon, and in many cases, going through the contract process, a lot of retailers require contact customer support methods. So, like when they're selling products to customers, they want to make for sure that the brands that they're selling in their retail locations at least have some ability for customers to reach out and get customer support on this particular product. And for chemical products, there are some regulations like we actually will have to have as we move to retail, a physical mailing address that they can mail the product back to, or
okay.
like
Well,
they can contact or send,
that was my next
and then
question.
we
Yeah, the mailing address.
yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, and then we also have to have a phone number. Like a lot of these retail locations are requiring us to have a customer,
Yeah.
facing customer service,
Yeah.
phone number, which,
Yeah.
is a whole different thing. And like with that, a lot of times you follow in the footsteps of most of these other ones where you get the 1-800 numbers, or, where you can spell out, 1-800 3D Gloop, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of those things that we knew going into this, that our product was going to be retail at some point, provided that you know we played our cards right and everything grew the way that we wanted to. So we invested in a lot of that earlier on, because it was like, okay, hey, if we get it now, we have it. We
It's
when it
established.
comes time, it's
Mm-hmm.
there.
Sure.
So but that's another thing, is like when you get to retail, here in the United States, many retail locations require a UPC code. And
Yep.
that is something where you have to register, you have to pay a substantial amount of money in
It's
many
actually
cases.
cheaper now than it used to be. It used to be a lot
Yeah.
more expensive to what is it? The GTN? What's the
Yeah.
entity you have to register UPC codes with?
Yeah, GS1, I believe, or
GS1?
something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to sell
Yeah.
brick and mortar product, guys,
Mhm.
there were some workarounds in the past that people did where they would like buy onto other people's bulk. Like you used to be able to go.
Mhm.
I don't know if you still can. You probably still can go onto
Oh, you
eBay,
probably can. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
buy just a lot of 1,000 UPC codes. But what would happen inevitably, and Amazon started cracking down on this, and others may have as well. That there's a company when you scan those UPC codes, there's a company that is tied to that registration number, and it's actually
Mhm.
decodable, where it would say,
Mhm.
Wayne Co. 123 or whatever, and this was the product and whatever. I mean, it's meant to be a database, right? That's the kind of the whole
Yep.
purpose. So Amazon, a lot of people were doing this for Amazon.
Yep.
They would just buy these because Amazon didn't care in the beginning.
Yep.
But when I first looked into this 6 years ago, I want to say it was something like 10 grand to like get registered. And it's since come down to, it's still expensive, but it's more
Yeah.
reasonable to get in at like a 10
Yep.
UPC code level instead of having to
Yeah,
buy
it's like
100 or
500 to
1,000 or,
$1,000 to register, and you
but it
get your
all adds up.
UPC code,
And
and
it's all
it does. It
frustrating when
adds
you're
up.
started off. You're like, God, I gotta pay for this now too. I gotta pay for this now too.
Yep. Well, yeah, and then it's every year you have to pay to renew it. And keep that alive, that listing alive. And yeah, that's one of those things that we're still going through that process because
Right.
again, we are a product that's going to be sold on Amazon and in brick and mortar stores. It's a requirement.
Yeah.
And so this is part of the requirement of building your business.
Well, let's talk about that phrase for a second. That dirty old phrase, that's the cost of doing business, right? Because
Uh-huh.
we as bootstrap startups
Mhm.
love to
Yep.
try to circumvent that more, and we've talked about it in the realm of technical debt, where it's like, you don't necessarily have to do that, but you may pay a price
Mhm.
later on because you didn't do it the right way in the first place. And that's the rub in a lot of this stuff, right? Where it's
Mhm.
just like, there's go back to the email thing. There's a lot of people who are like, look, man, if you can't, it's tough love, but there are
Yep.
a group of people out there that believe like if you can't afford to, at the very least, register a domain and do this, like, I don't consider you a business.
Yep.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but there is that opinion out there. By the same standard, they may say if you don't have your own building, if you don't have a, it's that judginess, like, right, like, oh, you're not a real business till you have employees or till you have a building or you have whatever 100 employees or
Sure.
whatever it might end up being, but but the that's the whole
Mhm.
nature of groups in general. There's always going to be the ones at the top that'll be like, small business, like they don't have it. But let's back up and talk about, like, okay, how much money do I really need to start this thing up? Like, you don't really need a whole lot. You gotta depends on what
Yep.
you're, if your service, you got to just be able to market yourself and get people to give you money
Mhm.
for what you're doing. If you're
Yep.
if you're product based, you need money to buy materials, cost of goods, inventory, whatever. It can be a lot more expensive as a startup, right? And
Yep.
there's a lot of things you're going to encounter that you didn't think about, like, oh, I need UPC codes, I need labeling and packaging, and I didn't realize how much this all adds up. Let me tell you something, guys. You haven't lived until you've dropped like 10 grand on boxes over the
On
course of
boxes.
like
Yes.
over the course of a
Yeah.
quarter, a year, whatever big you are, right? And you're just like, geez, like, I got to spend that much on what?
Mhm.
There's not a day goes by that I don't feel like we have some sort of moment like that as a startup, bootstrap startup, especially. Um, but I would argue that that's an important activity to go through, and a lot
Mhm.
of value of being the bootstrap, because when you're VC funded and you're spending other people's money, it's just like, oh, we got to do that. Okay, great. Spend. And then before you know it, you're like,
And
oh,
yep.
we're out of money.
Yeah. Mhm.
So it keeps you a little bit more honest,
Yep.
around the process. And you got to think about, what do I really need versus what do I want?
Mhm.
And how do I go
Yep.
from there? Mailing address, we talked about, contact
Mhm.
forms and stuff like that. That's actually something in some capacity, where, like, a PO box, you can have that for
Mhm.
some things, but you need to have a
Yep.
physical address for other stuff.
Sure.
um and I think a lot of people shortcut, unfortunately, like, they just end up using a personal address when they're like, what's something that's required to have a physical, obviously, like, shipping based stuff. Often, like, there
Mhm.
are things that cannot be shipped to a PO box. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think. I know we've run into this in the past, and I'm not thinking of the specifics now, but I remember I had to reveal my personal address when I was first getting started, that we eventually had to change over. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember like, and this is still the case. Even with accepted quantities of shipping products, I still have to put my name and my address of where it ships out of. I can't use our main office address, which is located somewhere else.
Hmm. Hmm.
So in a lot of cases, what ends up happening is it's my personal house address that's on all of our shipments that are going out. It's frustrating, but it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. That's one of those requirements. Now, yes, I could probably get away with not doing that, but then I open myself up to liability. So,
Mm.
you know,
In
um,
in California, are required as an LLC to have something called a registered agent, which is
mhm,
a place that any legal um,
yep,
paperwork can always be able to be sent in relation to your business. And unfortunately, that's a list that is grossly oversold to marketing people. So like that can open up some stuff. And so you
yep,
could put your own address on there, but there is an expense associated with having a registered agent basically be that intermediary for you so that you don't have
mhm,
to absorb a bunch of junk mail into have stuff sent to your personal address. So it's
yep,
like almost like a specialized PO box for legal paperwork as relates to the business. So that's what it's
yep,
supposed to be for. But
yeah,
like I said, it's a public anything that's listed as a public resource
mhm,
is inevitably abused for the purposes of marketing,
mhm,
which is just such a crummy side effect of a lot of these things.
yep.
Yeah. Any other things as we wrap up because we're over time as always. As Mike in the chat is saying, please smash that like button and subscribe if you're interested in this content. If you want to be on in the future or want to converse with us, we can always call in. We have the hotline.
Mhm,
We love getting your chat here. Like I said, we record every Friday at 9 a.m.
yep,
Pacific. And we're both pretty active on Twitter as well. So you can always tweet at us. I'm at Repkord, Repkord. And Andrew is at 3D Gloop. And that's a great way to kind of get a hold of us as well. So,
yeah.
um, really, really awesome hanging out with you guys today in the chat. Thank you for joining us. I hope you got some tidbits. There's a lot more probably to this. Like we could do a revisit in terms of like, okay, getting started, getting off the ground.
Mhm,
But hopefully that gives you kind of a sense of some baseline best
yeah.
practice or requirement, and gives you some things to think about if you're thinking about getting started on your own. I will tell you this, it's not as bad as you think. It's very frustrating. I know exactly what Llama's going through now, just thinking like, oh, I got limited time. We've got all these things to do. I don't want to spend my time working on a website and taking photos
Yep.
and all this stuff. And we still have to make the product and we still have to pack the product and we still have to ship the product. It feels really overwhelming when you're getting started, and that is totally normal. Okay.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
believe it or not, you start to chip away at it and you go, okay, yeah, actually, that wasn't so bad. A lot of times it's just getting to the next day, building the confidence in it, and then you just
Mhm.
keep putting one foot in front of the other and you'll get there. But we appreciate you guys and we look forward to talking to you guys on a future episode, seeing you on a future episode of Maker That Money. Until then, I am Pooch of Repcord,
I'm Andrew 3D Gloop.
and we will talk to you soon. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good
See
weekend.
ya.